don't you tell us a little bit about your formal culinary training and kind of how you got to where you are today, and maybe a little bit about the pathway you took.
No, I right out of high school joined the Marines, and from the Marines to LSU, and I thought I'd be a Marine officer, a pilot, or something. And then, you know, the truth is that I've always loved cooking. And so you should have seen the faces of my friends when I told them, you know, I'm going to put away this little, you know, this little dream of mine of being a Marine pilot and focus on becoming a cook. I want to be a chef one day. And then this was in a day and age when it wasn't too cool. This is way before food TV and all that stuff. And so it's like, you're going to do what? And so no, I'm going to become a chef. So I went to the Culinary Institute of America, stayed in the Marine Reserves while I was doing that, because I was on a little scholarship when I was in school originally. Mm-hmm. So my deal was I'd stay in the Marine Reserves, go to school in upstate New York at Poughkeepsie or Hyde Park at the Culinary Institute of America, which was an awesome program. Huge program, and a program just steeped in tradition and formality, and that was great. And from there, got called back into the Marines and sent to the Gulf War, and did about a year and a half outside of school, and then they brought me back again, or I came back and stayed in reserves while I finished school. That really taught me so much, and real pivotal point in my life where once I was taken away from food, I was hungry to go back to it. And so when I came back into the culinary field at the CIA to finish up, I was so focused on just being the best. Just look, none of this other stuff matters. I want to be the best chef that I could be, and that kind of drove me on a path. And so from there, I married the girl next door, and then she and I ran off to Europe, and I made an apprenticeship for a 2-star Michelin place in the Black Forest of Germany, and then that chef got me a job in France, and so went to France, and all of a sudden things just kind of went from one chef to the next, and I had good mentors, and those mentors kind of showed me the way and led me to the next job, which brought me all the way back home. And that's what I've tried to emulate in my own life, being a chef, making sure that there were opportunities for others and a clear path for, look, we've got this great cook, let's just not try to keep he or she for ourselves, but let's make sure that they are on a good path for their lives. And that paying it forward, as it was paid to me, has paid huge dividends. And so now we have about, we're working on opening our 12th restaurant, and by that point, by the end of the summer, we'll employ about 1,000 people.
Wow.
And it's awesome to have these great chefs like Ryan Landry, who you've worked with for years, play the role of mentor, making sure that the people that I mentored are now mentoring others. And then it's going to be your job to mentor the next generation. And it's beautiful to see just how, the things that I learned back in the day of the brigade system in the Marines to the brigade system in the kitchen, and now to watch my own brigades work is really beautiful. And so tying that into philanthropy and making sure that we're not just good mentors, but we're also helping those in the community that we don't know elevate themselves. That to me is, that's the reason why we're here on earth. So if I can use my talents as a cook and still make the world a better place, then I've really done my job.
Have you always been based in New Orleans then, or is that where you were born and raised?
I'm from New Orleans. I haven't made it very far.
So that's running through your bloodstream.
From Side Hill, actually. I mean, from New Orleans, from a small town, like from the country, just outside of New Orleans. And my love for cooking grew up there, hunting and fishing, and all those great family meals and the great culinary traditions of New Orleans was just something that tie us all together. Black, white, yellow, red, purple. We all love gumbo. Yeah. Rich or poor, we all eat jambalaya. We are tied together through our, using food as that thread that holds the fabric of our culture together. Even in later times, that culture was threatened by hurricanes and oil spills, then I saw that as a chance for chefs to make a difference. And that's why we really kind of led the way to make sure that we were employing sustainable practices, from the way we buy food to investing in farmers and fishers and shrimpers and making sure that we still have this culture to pass on to the next generation. But that education years ago was the foundation for all that would come. And so to me, when I see what Leon's doing, and the sky is the limit. I mean, I was just a poor kid from Slidell. I had no clue of what this culinary world would bring me. And so to see you at this point, with all of your ambition and your knowledge and your leadership that you have, the sky is really the limit for you. What you've learned here, you'll never stop learning as long as you keep that humility. And you should always read. You should always record what it is that you learn. And who knows, that's going to be your first book one day.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Totally off, kind of part of the topic, but I'm just curious, from your time in Europe, which culture you feel is most closely resemble, your background and your philosophy.
Well, so many of them do. I ended up in Germany because I couldn't get a French work permit. Mm-hmm. And then I had a job in London, but I couldn't get a British work permit.
Right.
It's nowadays rich kids travel there and their parents pay their way and all that. I didn't have that. My dad was a disabled vet, and we had a decent life, but we didn't have much more than that. Mm-hmm. And so I needed to make money, and I had just gotten married, and so I found this job through friends of friends in the Black Forest, and it was there that really changed my life, where in southern Germany, on the border of France, Switzerland, and Germany, there's this small Alemannish culture that exists and has existed for hundreds of years. Everything is organic. It's illegal otherwise.
Right.
Everything is farm to table before that term was
ever came around. Yeah.
Everything was from that very valley. So if we served it in the restaurant, it came from the Munster Valley.
Right.
And so what I learned there was this idea of localism. And I grew up with it. I mean, we wouldn't eat crabs unless they were from Lake Pontchartrain. And we're not eating shrimp from anywhere else unless they were brown shrimp or white shrimp caught in Louisiana waters. It wasn't because we were so proud of it. It was just how we did things. And so I grew up with localism, but then it really taught me, that was a lesson, like, hey, we should be doing more on the farming side, And so when I moved back, and all these lessons that I learned, I moved back, there were no farmers markets. Now there's a farmers market in every
community, multiple.
Which is awesome.
Yeah, it's great.
That this movement has taken shape, and that it existed maybe in Berkeley, California, and existed in upstate New York to a small degree with some of the great chefs there, but it really didn't exist anywhere else in this country. So when I came back, my learning experience was there, and I just applied it to what I knew. The style of food that I cook and still cook today, and was influenced by most greatly, had been the French style of food. And so between the idea of localism in Germany to my working in the south of France, that style of food to this style of thinking, this consciousness about where your ingredients come from, really came together and influenced me. These two influences were probably the most profound.
I've been to a couple of your restaurants. I think they're really awesome. I met Alan, probably my favorite restaurant of the ones that I went there, Dominica. I thought he was just really clued in. He'd spent some time in Italy and done the charcuterie. When you're looking for somebody to lead, and I see he's also a finalist for James Beard, isn't he? When you're looking for somebody to lead, do you bring them in from the ground and start to take them into a restaurant and then build them up from there, or are you seeking talent from outside?
As a cook, for instance, and there's a young as a sous chef, and so from rising from the ranks of sous chef to then now being part owner in 3 of his own restaurants with me. Really says a lot. And so we saw so much potential. He was interested in opening an Italian place, and I've always wanted to open one. My wife and I lived in outside of Basel. On Sundays, we drive to northern Italy, and this is before the Euro, and so I could take my Deutschmarks, drive all the way through Switzerland, and I was like a poor cook in Germany, but I was rich in Italy.
Right.
You'd trade them in for lira, and then I could actually afford to go to a really nice restaurant. And so on Sundays when we were off, we'd say on Sundays we're Italian. So we drive to northern Italy, which is like 3 hours away, and so drive there, have a great weekend, drive back, and I was a poor German cook again. And I wanted Alon to really understand Italy and understand that culture, but not cook as a chef, but learn to cook like an Italian grandmother. And so Mark Vetri, who's a great chef out of Philadelphia, is one of my best friends. He lived in Bergamo, and so I contacted Mark and I said, Mark, can you hook Alon up with a job with Alonso in Bergamo? And so Alon went there, and then he met somebody that knew somebody over at the Salumificio where they make all the salamis and whatnot. And so then he goes over there and he learns that, and then he gets another side job working for this little pizzeria called Pizzeria Enzo. And so one thing led to another. He found his own path just through a helping hand from Mark Vetri, and now he's, not to say that he's the master of it, but he mastered his craft. He came back and brought us the best pizza that New Orleans had ever seen, the best pasta that New Orleans had ever seen, and we started farming our own Mongolista pigs so that we could have the small salumificio, making our own salumis in-house, so that whatever went on that pizza or into that pasta came from something that we raised. There were that localism came in again. And so the whole thing is really beautiful how it came about. But I look at Alon, and a lot of the traits that I saw in Alon, I see in Lee, because both were hungry and humble and excited about what it is that they're doing and needing to focus. But yeah, so when you're at this young age, you have to learn all these different things until you find out where you're being pulled, where you're called.
I mean, I think I love the aspect of the authenticity of that, of actually going to those countries, and because I mean that's kind of my pathway as well, to go there and directly get and bring back to this culture and kind of integrate it into this culture, which sometimes is it's foreign, and so that to me is really awesome. I was very impressed with Alon and his whole Salumi program, and how excited he was about it too, because you could see like the exuberance that he had about it as well.